Hello. Today we're going to be presenting about the COVID-19 virus that has been a serious threat in the United States and globally for the past 3 years. The presenters in our group are Samantha Ahern, Sydney Connor, Caitlin Dahl, myself, and Caroline Sabatier.
Hi, I'm Caroline. The scientific name of COVID is SARS-CoV-2. COVID was believed to originate in Wuhan, China through the transmission of a bat to human. This is known as zoonotic transmission, which is when a virus can jump across species. Two COVID variants discovered are SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV. SARS-CoV is more transmissible but less lethal, and MERS is less transmissible and more lethal. The possible COVID symptoms are that typical of a cold, such as a runny nose or a cough. In a bad situation, it could lead to a respiratory infection. In a respiratory infection, the body might overcompensate to deal with this infection, which could lead to a cytokine storm. This damages the alveoli, thin tissue, and then the fluid could build up in the lungs, leading to pulmonary
Hello,
edema.
I'm Samantha. As we know now, everyone is at risk for contracting the COVID-19 virus. However, transmissibility rates, death rates vary with the different COVID variants, with age, and with other underlying health conditions. Here are 5 major health conditions that can impact one's immune system and therefore make them more at risk for contracting COVID-19.
Hi, my name's Sydney, and I'm going to be talking about how the infection of SARS-CoV-2 happens inside of the body at the biological level. So this is a SARS-CoV spike protein, and the red things coming off of it are receptor binding domains, also known as RBDs for short. The RBDs can bind to the ACE2 receptor, which is on the cell membrane. And then the TMPRSS2 is a serine protease, and a protease is something that can cleave at things. So when the viral genome binds into the ACE2 receptor, it can cleave at the polyprotein and exposes the lipid vesicle of it so that it can fuse the viral genome into the actual plasma membrane of the cell, where it can then destroy the cell and infect it.
Thankfully, we have 2 drugs available for those infected with COVID. One of them is called remdesivir. Remdesivir works by mimicking adenine, but it has a triple-bound nitrogen, which prevents further elongation during DNA replication. Another possible drug is Paxlovid. This drug works by inhibiting the Mpro, the major protease, from cleaving the polyprotein and furthering the infection.
Once again, my name's Caitlin, and now we're going to be discussing the statistics of the COVID-19 virus in the United States. So as we all know, there are many positive cases per day at a national level. Right now we're averaging about 78 million per day, which is a lot, but not too much compared to what it was like in 2019. Next, the mortality rate is increasing at a very linear level, as you can see here. So from June 2020 to February of 2021, it was increasing every day, and mortality rate is death, which is not a good thing. As you can see here, in April of 2021, the vaccines were implemented, which showed a significant decrease in the mortality rate. That doesn't mean the infection was over, it just means that there were less deaths occurring. And then another big deal in the United States is hospitalization. So at the time of COVID infection, many people who had bad respiratory infections had to go to the hospital for it, and there was a point at which many hospitals were shut down and weren't letting any new patients in. It was all COVID patients.
Okay, now I'm going to be talking about the COVID vaccine. So the COVID vaccine targets the spike protein on the virus, and once the spike protein is binded to, it's unable to bind to the ACE2 receptor on the cell, which makes the virus unable to enter the host cell and infect the person. So the COVID vaccine is an mRNA vaccine, which is different than other protein-based vaccines. So the mRNA enters our cells through a lipid nanoparticle, and by the cell going into the lipid nanoparticle, it can't be degraded by enzymes on its way to the cell, and once it reaches the cell, it fuses with our cell membranes to then enter the cell smoothly. This mRNA vaccine mimics natural infections once the mRNA is into the cell. It translates for the proteins, which target the spike protein, so we're unable to get infected by COVID.
So as we all know, there are many variants of COVID right now. There's Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Omicron, and they could be more out there because what happens biologically is these variants cause mutations in the spike protein, which then change the chemistry of the RBD, making it able to bind to the ACE2 receptor on the cell membrane more tightly and fuse into the plasma membrane, which is why the vaccines don't really account for all of the mutations because they're constantly happening and not one can just be prevented.
As we wrap up our discussion about the COVID-19 virus, it's important to touch upon the mental health toll that has taken on all individuals. As you can see here, it's affected people of all ages, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, and economic standing. Things like anxiety and depression are a lot to worry about in a time like this because there's a lot of uncertainty. We could shut down into quarantine tomorrow like we have before. There's a big economic standpoint as well. Many businesses have shut down, people are losing money out of work, and there's just a lot that people don't know what to expect. Like you could lose a grandmother or just your best friend from experiencing COVID. So the mental health toll is a big concern for COVID-19 as well.
That concludes our discussion for COVID. And getting to know COVID on a more biological level helps you understand all the consequences that have taken place in the real world.
Let's put this virus to an end by getting vaxxed and wearing our mask.